Sunday night, so it's time for another Savvy Chat. I am your host, Jen Horangeff from Savvy Cooperative, and I am joined tonight by Geri Lynn Baumblatt and Erin Moriarty Wade, and we are going to be having an amazing conversation about something that's super important, and that's caregiving. They're kind of the unsung heroes of the care team, those family members or loved ones that really go above and beyond to make sure that the patients are getting the care they need at all times. So Geri has an amazing background and has done a lot of different things, working both at Emmy, a startup that she was with from the beginning. Now she does patient engagement, strategy, and consulting, also works in digital health as an advisor. Erin has a background as a freelance writer specializing in healthcare. She's covered everything from the AIDS epidemic to Southeast Asia and a hospital competition in Atlanta. And she also is the mother of a child with a rare autoimmune condition. So thank you guys both for joining us. Geri, where are you calling in from today?
I'm here in Chicago, so right downtown.
And Erin, where are you?
I'm in South Florida.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys.
Porch here.
I know, wherever you can do it. You're caregiving, right? You have to find a quiet spot away from the kiddos.
Balmy night here, so it's good.
Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time. Like I say, this is such an important topic, and I myself is somebody who considers himself a patient, but I have had to care for both my mother, my grandparents, close family friends, and it's definitely interesting to see it from that perspective. Somebody who's grown up with chronic illness being in the patient bed is very different than the person caring for them. And it's just as, if not harder and more stressful. And so I'm glad that we can take the time to kind of talk about this. And I think that people realize that as we age, our parents inevitably get older. And that means that there may be more problems that we either witness our parents having and that we may actually need to intervene. So Geri, you've had experience as a caregiver for many people, but I first want to kind of ask you about what you've dealt with your parents. Your dad got sick and you witnessed and had to deal with both him and how that impacted your mother. So can you kind of walk us through what that experience was like?
Yeah, sure. And I should say that we should have been ahead of the game because we're a medical family. So my dad was a retired physician. My mom's a former nurse who lives to caregive. And I work in healthcare. My sister-in-law is a physician. So you think we would have really had this, but it was really, first of all, surprising to me how, over time, it just really started taking a toll on my mom. It was hard for her to even she'd have to call neighbors or 911 to get him back up. She injured herself a couple times. And then one time when we even had to put him in a long-term acute care setting just briefly, it wasn't a great facility. So she was really there being like a great advocate and watching over him, but she would stay too late and get tired and was actually in a car accident. And she didn't even tell us right away because she didn't want us to stop her from going back to take care of him. So it really got to the point where I became almost more worried about my mom's health because we knew that my dad, only had so many years left, but it was really starting to both physically and mentally and all kinds of things and socially take a serious toll on her. And then I also started realizing with her that it was us as well, and that we were all starting to kind of have different issues at work, which I know we'll talk about later. But I really started to see how it has a very real impact on the family caregiver's health.
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I think, again, we think about the patient and their health needs, but forget how that impacts the individual caregiver as well as the family. And so that's where, Erin, you have a different perspective, being that of a parent of a child who has a chronic condition that really needs caring for. And of course, you have other kids as well. So before we kind of dive into the impact that that's had on kind of your family as a whole, tell me about what it's been like to care for a kid, because I've been that sick kid, and people always say how horrible it must have been for me growing up with a chronic condition. But I always say, gosh, my heart goes out to my mom and my dad, all the parents of kids with chronic illness, because you guys didn't ask for this and you've had to learn a lot along the way. I know that you love your child, but you didn't expect to have to become a medical expert. So what has that been? What did you have to learn?
Yeah, I mean, I guess similar to what Geri said, it really completely caught me off guard too. I mean, the difference is we're not a medical family. My husband works in the corporate world and I was a journalist and freelance writer for many years. No medical training, but we had 3 healthy children and we were busy, but we were happy and everybody was healthy. And the time when Ainsley got sick, she was 5. So, we had a totally healthy, normal child who all of a sudden at the age of 5 has this like completely bizarre range of symptoms happening that no one can explain. And it's just, one specialist after another, after diagnostics, x-rays, blood tests, more blood tests, biopsy, ultrasound, like it just, there's no answer, there's no explanation. And then, when we finally figured out what was wrong with her, there's no reason, like, they just don't know why your body does this. Sorry, this is just a super rare autoimmune disease that she's going to have to deal with. So it's hard because I think it's different in the sense that, my parents are in their mid 70s and I worry about them and I've watched my dad struggle with health issues. Unfortunately, thank God my mom's very healthy, but it's almost like I expect to worry about them. But with my daughter, I was just like, whoa, I never in a million years thought that I would be faced with that. But yeah, it was definitely a learning curve for me, even though, I mean, thankfully, having been a healthcare reporter, I had done that full time for quite a few years and off and on part time for a long time. So I knew how to navigate better than most people, and I was definitely at an advantage in that sense, thankfully. And I kind of was aggressive about trying to figure out like what are the best options. And we're so lucky that we had amazing health insurance through my husband's employer, and so we were lucky in a lot of ways, even though it was a difficult situation. But yeah, I mean, I learned how to give her an IV at home. I learned how to like give injections and time out Zofran and all kinds of things that I never really wanted to learn. I used to joke to my husband, I'm like, next year for Halloween, I'm going to be a hazmat worker. Like, just like there's blood, I'm cleaning up vomit, there's syringes in the bedroom. Like, it was crazy. But, you do what you have to do and keep going.
Yeah, wow. And so, so you've had to learn all those sort of medical things that you didn't expect to, but you've also talked to me before about how this has really impacted your kids, how you kind of had to juggle all of that. It's something that I care deeply about as that chronic illness kid whose older sister ended up, I don't want to say being ignored, because I know that wasn't what was being done purposely, but ultimately it impacts the siblings. And I think these dear siblings who are just kind of getting the short end of the stick, they didn't sign up for this either. So how did that impact your other kids?
It did. Our daughter Ainsley, she's our middle child, so she's got an older brother, and then it's her, and then she's got a little brother, and the little guy was only, I guess 1 when all this started happening. So he was kind of, just running around tearing up the house, not really aware. But she and her older brother have always been very close. So he's, definitely was always worried about her and has been very like loving and dedicated and helpful. And, through like a surgery and the IVs and all that stuff, like he would joke like, Ainsley, I'll be your servant. Like, you lay on the couch and you do your IV and you just tell me I'll do anything you want. And he would like go when we had to do her shot and she would get upset. It's a weekly thing. She would get upset and he would go and get something funny on YouTube and say like, okay, we're going to watch this funny skit. It's going to make you laugh. And then mommy's going to give you the shot and you won't even notice. And so he was amazing, but he did have to, grow up faster. I mean, I never would have like on my own decided, I'm going to just let my 3rd grader start walking home alone and going home to an empty house. And that's, like 2 days a week in New Jersey. We had to do that because I had childcare. We were there 4 days a week and I had childcare 2 of those days. But just, when I stopped working financially, I couldn't afford like full-time childcare to just go to medical appointments. So it did affect him. certainly. And he said to me the other day, a couple weeks ago, actually, just kind of broke my heart. He was like, I took him for his physical and his flu shot, and we were driving home, and it was just him and I, which is kind of unusual. And he was like, Mom, thank you so much for taking me to do that. And I was like, well, of course, and he was like, well, I know you're so busy with all Ainsley's stuff, and I just want to let you know I appreciate that. And I was like, oh my God, I was like driving, and I'm like, I felt like I wanted to cry, but at the same time, I was like, it's so sweet that he realizes that and appreciates it, so.
Yeah, but that's heartbreaking. And I think you have a situation where it sounds like he was really supportive and at least was, for his age, active in her care as well, and trying to help, be a support system. I had a sister who I think just really didn't want to think about me as having this condition and getting the attention. And so was really very absent in the whole process. And it's, been very challenging.
How old are you guys?
We're 3 years apart. She's 3 years older.
Okay.
And
exactly
while,
Ainsley and Charles.
Yeah. And while, she loves me dearly, it's just something that's been really interesting to see how other siblings have been more involved in their other siblings' care. And, every family is different. And I think that those have their challenges. And, I also think that we oftentimes, when we think about caregiving, we think about the obvious ones like parents and children and then spouses and caring for those individuals. But that's not the only place that people will care for others. And it might be friends or grandparents or, people that you're dating. And that, because of certain regulations that are out there, can have its own struggles and challenges around actually helping these individuals, because there are things like HIPAA that make it so that those providers aren't sharing details about people that aren't family, and that can be tricky. So, Geri, you've dealt with this aspect of it, of having to go through that. Can you tell me about what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, both me and some of my friends. So I had a really acute situation where my husband, then fiance, had an emergency, and we were actually like a week and a half from his new insurance kicking in. And when we took him to the hospital, they would not let me back in the ER with him, even though he kept requesting me. It was really frustrating. So his mom came, but it took her quite a while to get there. And then even when he was in the hospital, they frequently wouldn't talk to me. Every single time I asked them a question, they would ask his permission to answer it, to the point of just like, it was at the beginning of the really like kind of crazy HIPAA stuff. But I've also had that with friends, where a friend was caring for his ex-boyfriend, and his work was like totally not understanding, like, why is this your job? And certainly that's not covered by FMLA. And other cultures, it's a big deal too, right? Like you might have been raised by your aunt or a cousin even. I also have a cousin who cares for her adult sibling who has a couple really severe issues. And so I think those are the types of things that people just forget about, that there's extended family or even neighbors. And what are you going to do? You're not going to like just abandon this person. And I think a couple states have been trying to expand FMLA to cover more of those situations.
You just define FMLA for those that aren't.
Yeah, sure. It's the Family Medical Leave Act, and it gives you unpaid leave, but it guarantees you that you should be able to get your job back. Although people have had issues with that too. So I think the bigger issue is whether or not FMLA covers it. Workplaces just need to start to get a better understanding of this, because clearly, like, you're not going to abandon your best friend or whoever it may be.
Yeah, and I think, that then speaks to what people go through as the caregiver, trying to juggle all these things. I know when I was taking care of my grandparents, I was still doing my PhD, which meant I had a more flexible schedule. And so the rest of the family just assumed that, of course, it would be me, because I had the schedule that allowed for me to take the time. And it put a lot of burden on me to be that individual. And same when I cared for my mother, I just dropped everything and canceled all my meetings and moved into the hospital with her for weeks. And that can be, really challenging for people who do have to report in every single day. And I would love to hear how that's impacted both of you, because I know that it has. So Erin, what was it like for you when you were caring for your child and having to be at the hospital so many days a week?
I mean, the main thing for me was just like, in the beginning, it was just like extreme like stress and just being terrified, like for a long time. As my kid or her hands had become partially paralyzed, and we're just like literally like frozen. And I was so scared. I mean, we just worried like, will they ever go back? And mostly it was just like that was the focus. But then after a few months of it, I realized it was going to be more of like a loss for me in terms of not being able to do what I wanted to do.
Speaking of caregiving.
Yeah, sorry. So, I had a job that I loved and that I had to stop doing. And it was just the reality of like 4 days a week at the children's hospital plus a gazillion other appointments. And, somebody had to do that. And my husband is more of the breadwinner in our family by far. So it was going to be me, and we had just moved to northern New Jersey where we had not a single friend, no family. And so it was just like, here we are, figure it out. So
And
it was hard.
Something that was a choice for you, or were you asked to kind of reevaluate?
What do you mean?
I mean, did you choose to, kind of revamp your work schedule, or did your work?
Oh no, I just totally stopped. I mean, it was like it was a freelance contract writing anyway, so it wasn't like I had, it wasn't like I had a team or a full-time position, but it was something that something that I loved, and it was healthcare writing, and it it made me happy. I made a little bit of money, and I got to use my skills professionally, and then it was just gone. And it was like, instead, you're gonna do these 8 million appointments and clean up vomit and give injections and do an IV and go to physical therapy and go to occupational therapy. And so that was what I did. But I think the really weird part for me was afterwards. Like, so we did that for 15 months. Wait, no, 16 months, I think. And then she was getting better. And then we moved back to South Florida intentionally to try to give her a better shot at health, which did really help, thank God. And when we got back here, I was determined to like get back to work and, make that a priority. And I was like shocked at how hard it was having stepped away, because even before, every time I had a baby, I would be like bounce right back to work. Within weeks or months, I would be back, writing, working. And I just never realized like the impact of stepping away for over a year. And that was huge and unfortunately not positive. So that for me, that was a big reality of it.
Yeah, that's really challenging. And Geri, for you, you do have a job, or did have a job that you had to report to at the time. So what was that like? Did they care? Were they supportive? Did they ask you how you were?
I think part of the problem was there was this idea of more like an open door policy. But the problem is that works pretty well in an acute or emergency situation where you're like, somebody had a heart attack, somebody broke a hip, they get it, and they're like, go, go, go. But the problem is when caregiving goes on for many, many years, and keep in mind, median for caregiving is 5 years. And if you're caring for somebody with dementia, it's more like 10 or even 15. So the problem is when this goes on for a long time, your colleagues might not understand, your manager, especially if they haven't experienced it. It often really just comes down to your manager and how comfortable you are talking to them or they are talking to you. And they knew what was going on, but nobody ever proactively came to me and said, hey, do you need some time? Because I was already taking time coming in late, leaving early, going, I remember one time I came back from just getting my dad out of the hospital and getting him into like a group home. And literally I got back to the office and I got a text and I was like, I got to go again. And they were like, you just got here. And you feel crazy because some of these stories are really crazy too. But you already feel like you don't want to draw attention to yourself. I mean, I was like employee number 4 and I was doing a lot of work and I had a great track record there, but you still just start feeling when this goes on for years that like, okay, I'm just going to jump out of this meeting to take this phone call from this doctor because I won't be able to get him back. And then you're like also the crazy person in your office, like screaming at a doctor on the phone, and people are like, stay away from her. So it just, it was really only after my dad passed away that our HR manager was like, well, you know, we would have given you more time off. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. Like, nobody came out and said that to me. And I was too scared that I was already like in and out so much unreliably that wasn't really a good thing to ask for. And I think a lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Is it's hard to understand or know what you can ask for because you don't want to be perceived as, you know, being the person that's asking for too much. So it kind of brings us to the question of what can employers or what other resources can there be out there that could help these individuals who are caring for others? Because obviously this isn't going away. We have an aging population and kids get sick and all of this. So Geri, I know you work a lot in this space. And what do you really see either being developed or what's still absent from the market on how we can better support caregivers?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot. Like, certainly having really clear policies would be incredibly helpful. And you can't just tell people what those are on like the day that they're hired. That's the kind of thing that has to kind of be regularly reiterated to employees and to managers. And then there are some places that do manager training for this because it is hard to deal with. But I think even when you're training managers, like, they really have to feel like they have support from, you know, the leadership to give people that flexibility. It can't just be, oh, you're lucky you have a cool manager who gets it, and I'm unlucky I have somebody who like is gonna, you know, really penalize me or look at me differently if I deal with this. And then there are a lot of great resources sometimes and things like EAPs. People just don't know how to find them. And especially when you're in a crisis or because people don't self-identify as doing this activity called family caregiving, they just recognize that their family's kind of in this chaotic situation. They don't think, gee, let me walk over and see what HR can tell me. And then they don't necessarily believe that there's anything truly helpful for them. So I think it's really about helping to identify people, making it okay to talk about it, and really probably having more flexible leave policies and making sure that kind of just gets communicated over and over. But a lot of it is going to come down to some real culture change in the workplace as we think about this, because it's already like 1 in 4 or 5 people are doing this. Yeah. And about 25% of those are already millennials. So it's not just people in their 40s and 50s, younger and younger people are dealing with it too.
Absolutely. And we had a comment here in the chat saying a great thing that they've observed at certain places, that now at some workplaces, they are able to donate earn time to other people. And so that's a really great way to help facilitate that. So, Erin, what are your sort of thoughts on other things people can be providing? What would be helpful for you?
Well, I mean, I think all of those things are great, and I've mostly only experienced those through writing about it, especially like the EAP and some of those like kind of office-based resources. But you know, since I've been a freelancer and a contractor for many years, that I don't have access to those types of resources. But I do think you know, there's something to be said for like just friends and neighbors in your community. And you know, in my experience, it was hard because we moved somewhere brand new where we didn't have any friends or family. But there are ways that you can reach out to somebody that you see going through this, and I think it's you know, important to think about, try to offer something specific. If you see like a neighbor or a friend who's struggling with this, don't say like, let me know if I can do anything. You know, say like, I'm gonna make you dinner on Wednesday. Do you want pasta or do you want chicken? And it's a specific, it's not a yes or no. It's a, I'm gonna do this and how would you like it? Or I'm gonna take your mom to one of her doctor's appointments next week. Let me know which one would work best for your schedule. Or I'm gonna take your kids one day on the weekend. Do you want Saturday or Sunday? Like, well, you know, one thing that happened to me in New Jersey and it blew me away. And I was like, so grateful. We'll never forget it. But Ansley's kindergarten teacher saw me pulling her out of school, 2 days a week to go to the hospital, and she knew we were there 4 days a week. And she said to me, as soon as school gets out, you let me know which day, that first week of summer, I'm going to take her one of the days to the hospital, and then I'm going to take her afterwards out for ice cream in the bookstore and like give you a break. And I was just like, oh my God, you have no idea how amazing that is. Like, and she did. And so there are ways you can like reach out and do that through a non-corporate, like non-structured channel.